It was supposed to be a pleasant break from my hectic city life, a hiking trip with my friends to the mountains that we'd planned for months. We'd heard about the stunning views and natural tranquility of the trail from a few of our other friends who had done the same hike earlier in the year. They had returned gushing about the clear blue skies, the lush green forests, and the mesmeric vistas. I was so excited to experience it for myself. The morning of our trip, I didn't leave anything to chance. I'd packed enough supplies to last me for days, from trail mix to extra batteries for my flashlight, energy bars to spare light clothing. Little did I know that I was actually preparing for something very different from what we had planned. After a few hours of hiking, the scenery was breathtaking. The sun stretched its rays, illuminating everything in front of us. The trail was smooth, the air was crisp, and my friend's company an exceptional relief from the being alone with my own thoughts. We were laughing, sharing secrets, and taking photos to capture every second of this very special trip. But it wasn't going to stay like that for long. We came to a clearing where the trail split into two paths. The most seemingly inviting of the two was enveloped by breathtaking rock formations. Its unusual shapes had gained it the nickname, the Devil's Crossroads. Though against my gut, my group chose this way. As we went down the Devil's Crossroads, everyone started to experience strange sounds and uneasiness. A branch would snap in nearby bushes, but when someone turned to catch a glimpse, it stopped. Everyone tried to dismiss the creepy sounds as they passed, but as the light started to fade up, the sound grew louder, showing us something more sinister was already upon us. One of my friends crouched onto his knees and started vomiting for no apparent reason, and it appeared that my other friends weren't feeling too good either. Witnessing the individuals most unaffected start to crumble to their knees out of nowhere, my fear knew no bounds. Suddenly, at this point, realizing that we were not alone, a sense of presage crept upon each of us. As the feeling of presage crept upon us, our unease turned into fear. We searched around, hoping to find another trail, but to our surprise, all paths led us back to the Devil's Crossroads. We stuck together, but fear was crippling me. Memories of every scary movie I'd ever watched flashed through my mind, and I began to panic. The sounds grew louder as the trees began to move menacingly, as if they were alive, hiding something in the near darkness. Suddenly, we saw figures moving through the woods, their eyes glowing in the dark, emitting a soft red hue. The figures started moving towards us slowly, not making any sound. We didn't need anyone to tell us that it was time to run. We didn't know where to go, but we knew staying wasn't an option. I led the charge as we sprinted down the Devil's Crossroads, and then there was this gut-wrenching scream that pierced the silent woods. A scream so loud that we could feel it in the depths of our souls and see it churning in the air. That was the moment when I knew that we were never making it out of here unharmed. We kept running, each of us pushing on despite the ominous feeling that continued to grow within us. Our pursuers continued to chase us, emanating such an intense energy that we could feel it throb against our skin. Finally, after what seemed like hours, we saw the trailhead in the distance. We kept running as fast as we could, ignoring the exhaustion and the fear. As we got to the trailhead, we collapsed to the ground. We looked back to see if anything was following us, but all we saw were the dark, ominous woods. We couldn't say what it was that chased us, but we knew that it wasn't human or any other things we'd ever seen. It's been years, but I still can't shake the unshakable feeling of dread that has stayed with me since that day. That hiking trip had promising prospects, but it turned out to be my closest encounter ever with something beyond human imagination, reminding me to pay attention to all the signs. There are things out. I had always loved hiking. The fresh air, the challenge of the trails, the stunning natural beauty of the wilderness. It was like nothing else in the world. So when my friends proposed a weekend hike through the remote woods nearby, I jumped at the chance. We set off early on a crisp Saturday morning, the sun just rising above the mountains as we laced up our boots and donned our packs. We were well prepared, our camping gear and food in tow, fully intending to spend 2 glorious nights under the stars. The first day went off without a hitch. We covered over 10 miles, taking in the breathtaking scenery and enjoying each other's company. We even managed to catch a glimpse of a family of deer grazing in a meadow as we stopped for lunch. As the sun began to set, we found the perfect spot to set up camp. A clearing by a babbling brook, surrounded by tall trees and the peaceful sound of crickets chirping in the distance. But as night began to fall, things started to feel a little eerie. The forest grew quiet, too quiet, and a sense of unease began to creep into my bones, an inexplicable feeling of dread that only grew worse as the hours wore on. I tried to brush it off at first, telling myself it was just the unfamiliarity of camping in the wilderness. But then I heard it, a rustling in the bushes just beyond our campsite. My heart pounding in my chest, I quickly reached for my flashlight and shone it in the direction of the noise, but there was nothing there, just the shadows cast by the trees and the sound of our own breathing. That's when I realized we were being watched, and not by any ordinary creature. Something was out there with us in the dark, something that wanted us, and wasn't going to stop until it got what it wanted. My heart pumping in my chest, I knew we had to act fast if we were going to make it through the night. With shaking fingers, I fished out my phone and began to dial for help. But as soon as I hit the button, my heart dropped into my stomach. No signal. And when I looked up again, my friends were gone. Panic set in as I scanned the campsite, my flashlight casting eerie shadows in every direction. But they were nowhere to be seen, and the rustling was getting closer. With trembling hands, I reached for my army knife, fully intending to fight off whatever was coming my way. But just as I was about to make my stand, I heard a familiar voice in the darkness. It was my friend Phil, calling out for me from behind a thicket of trees. Relief swept over me as I sprinted towards him, grabbing his arm with all the strength I could muster. But our joy would be short-lived. As we emerged from the trees into the clearing, we came face to face with the source of our terror, a pack of wild wolves, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. Too afraid to move, we stood frozen as the wolves breathed heavily, their howls echoing throughout the forest. And just as we thought we were done for, a gunshot rang out, and the pack scattered, disappearing into the night like ghosts. We were eventually rescued by park rangers, who had been alerted by my earlier phone call. But as we were loaded into the ambulance, wrapped in warm blankets and given hot tea, one question still haunted me. What had driven those wolves to such erratic behavior? And would we ever truly know? Or someday meet a fate worse than death? I'm not someone who scares easily, but what I experienced while hiking in the mountains a few months ago was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. I've always been an avid hiker and explorer, and have trekked through some of the most difficult trails in different parts of the world. But this time, I found myself in an uneasy situation. It started off as a simple hike with 3 of my friends to explore a supposedly small and isolated national park located in the middle of nowhere. Perfect for us to enjoy the lovely greenery, breathe in the fresh air, and test our endurance skills as hikers. The weather was pleasant. Besides the occasional bear or deer sightings, we didn't encounter many problems, till we noticed how quickly our surroundings were growing darker and the forest was thickening around us. Our plan was to hike until nightfall, but things quickly started to get weird. The air began to feel thick and suffocating, and the sky gradually turned dark and brooding, a stark contrast to the early morning sun. We stopped to take a break, and were awed by the ominous sound of ravens flying to and fro, in perfect synchronization, over our heads. It was so unnerving that we decided to take out our flashlights to inspect the area. This led us further into an eerie-looking cave system in the mountains. The stinky smell of something rotten hit us as we entered the cave, and though immediately regretting our decision to venture into this unknown territory, something inside me made me want to push on. As we turned on our flashlights, the light caught an unmistakable sight. Bones scattered all over, a stench fit for hell, and pools of dark muck that looked fresh, leading to a sickening realization that we were probably in some form of a predator's territorial habitat. I was completely petrified, my friends frozen beside me because my steady unraveling was palpable with every step we took through the sharp rocks. And as we kept walking, we heard something slithering. something that sounded as though it was following our footsteps, close enough that we could feel its hot breath colliding with the back of our necks. The poor lighting made it impossible till we started moving quicker now. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest any moment as we bolted out of the cave. Though we heard no sounds since that moment, and soon arrived back at our campsite safely, I felt like my nerves were still on edge for hours afterwards, my mind replaying the terrifying experience as we tried to sleep that night. Morning came, but no one dared to go further into the cave or any other unexplored areas that day. The remainder of our hiking adventure felt like it went by in a daze. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched and followed continuously. This event left us shaken and hyper-vigilant throughout it. I kept pondering who or what could have abducted one of our party while we slept, and all of us remained clueless. Even though we were safe, our little adventure in the mountains made me realize just how vulnerable we could be. We never did find out what or who lurked in that cave, but my nightmares every night until I arrive home a few weeks later proved to be scared reminder that there's more in the mountains than just beautiful trails. My friend were happy to return to civilization, but this experience tarnished our view of nature. Hiking, something that had once brought me peace and tranquility, now fills me with dread. I now know that nature had, and always will have, its own secrets. And we can only try to avoid the predator's path if we know we're in it, lest we end up becoming prey.